Forced to work from home by your employer? Laid off or feeling depressed at home? Do you want to make money working from anywhere? We'll show you how to do it from your couch. It's time for another episode of the Work From Home Show. Coming to you from their homes in Austin, Texas and Tampa, Florida, here are your hosts, Adam and Dinesh.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Work From Home Show. Shout out to all our homies, homeboys, homegirls, home trans, all the work from homers out there. I'm Dinesh with a very special guest today, Dinesh D'Souza. He has had a prominent career as a writer, scholar, and public intellectual. You've probably seen him all over Fox News, Newsmax, even CNN. He's been on TV. He's come out with New York Times bestselling books with top-rated documentaries and films. I've seen several of them. I've known of him, read his work, followed him for more than 15 years now, but he's been around for at least 30 years. Born in India, Dinesh D'Souza came to the U.S. as a student at the age of 18. He graduated from Dartmouth College. He was called, during his 20s, one of the top young public policy makers in the country, and he has become a major force in political policy, like I said, through his books, his films, his speeches. He also ran a couple of colleges and universities. He is a #1 best-selling author of tons and tons of books, but his latest one, as we enter into this election, which is just about 2 weeks away, his latest book is called Vindicating Trump, and he also produced a documentary film called Vindicating Trump as well. Dinesh D'Souza, welcome to the Work From Home Show.
Hey, great to join you, and thanks for having me.
Let's first start with the book and the film, because I didn't know about the film. So where is the film Vindicating Trump available? Because I want people, usually I save that for the end, but I want people to watch this film and to read the book within the next 1 week.
Yeah, so the film is available now in streaming on multiple platforms, and it's also available in DVD. The website is just vindicatingtrump.com. So if you go there, you can find out how to watch the film. The book, of course, is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, the usual places you can get books.
Let's talk about the book, or let's talk about Trump in general and Vindicating Trump, because I want this interview, I want you to make the assumption, even though you can say I'm a right-wing voter, I'm a registered Republican, but I want to reach out to the people in the middle, the people who are still undecided, the people who don't know who they're going to vote for. That's who I want this interview to target. So when it comes to Vindicating Trump, I want to bring up, because you talk about this in your book, some of the issues that people have with Trump. And let's start with January 6th. There are people who agree with Trump's policies. They agree with closing the borders, with the economy, with all that. But because of that one simple event that happened on January 6th, they're saying, I can't vote for him. You know, there's a way to say that an election was stolen without people breaking into the Capitol building. So what do you have to say about that?
I think that if you look objectively at January 6th, you can say a couple of things about it. One is that a large number of people came to Washington, D.C., and they were very restless and had the sincere conviction that the election had been stolen. I mean, just let that sink in for a moment. Now, at no point did Trump say to this crowd, A, go inside the Capitol, B, take over the place, C, stop the count. In fact, the proceeding that was going on inside the Capitol was not certification, but the questioning of the election. Ted Cruz was involved, a number of other Republican senators. So that's the last thing that the Trumpsters wanted to stop. Weirdly, if you look at the video on January 6th, and things did get out of hand, certainly at a couple of places, but nevertheless, by and large, you had the weird phenomenon of people being led into the Capitol, being high-fived by the cops. Ask yourself a simple question. If all these people were, quote, taking over the Capitol, was there a single instance where someone in authority put up a bullhorn and said, everybody evacuate this building, which would be the normal thing to tell a crowd. Get out of here. You don't belong here. That's the dog that didn't bark. That never happened. And I think all of this suggests to me that there is more that meets the eye, more than meets the eye, if you will, about what really happened on January 6th.
I 100% agree with you on that. I've looked into January 6th. I've seen the video. I see cops literally rolling out the red carpet, letting people in, taking them inside the building. Cops even telling each other, or Capitol Police even telling each other, almost like, I don't want to say it was staged, but it was pre-planned. Nancy Pelosi, she did not bring in more police beforehand. The mayor of DC, same thing. But at the same time, it's all about optics, right? And the optics did not look good for Team Trump, for Republicans. There were, yes, nobody was killed outside of the one woman who was killed by Capitol Police. No police officers were killed. It wasn't as violent as the media makes it seem, but it was violent. There are videos of people attacking police officers, of people fighting with each other, of blood on the streets. And so that's the biggest problem that I think swing voters have. You would probably disagree. I don't know how accurate the polls are. I still don't think the polls know how to poll Trump. They didn't poll the 2022 midterms, for example. But this January 6th issue, especially for older voters, is such a big deal. And I think that's a problem for Trump and the Republicans.
I mean, I agree. It's unprecedented. And moreover, the optics were bad. My point is that you got to remember one thing we haven't mentioned. There were possibly as many as 100, possibly more plants. I'm talking about plants by the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, and these are people who were dressed up as Trumpsters. So these are people who are wearing MAGA hats in plain clothes, egging on the crowd, if not engaging in violence themselves. And so try to see what happens when a government, I mean, that's the real insidious thing, right? For a crowd to get out of hand, by and large, crowds get out of hand all the time. Look at left-wing protests. You have people pulled out of cars and beaten up. Someone goes into a store and beats up this is all horrible stuff, but there's a very interesting book called Crowds and Power by the Italian sociologist Elias Canetti, and he says a crowd is kind of like a fire. It tends to spread. It's also, in a sense, irrational. If you come in a crowd and you say, run over there, the whole crowd starts moving in that direction. So crowds take on this kind of organism of their own. But it's the behind the scenes thing that is quite disturbing. Let me make a broader point, which is this. For anyone who says that Trump is, a dictator or has dictatorial tendencies or that he's lawless, you have to ask yourself this question. Trump was in for 4 years. It's one thing to warn people against something that this guy will do this or he will do that. But crowds in 2016 had chanted, lock her up in reference to Hillary. Did Trump lock her up? Did he even initiate proceedings against her? No. Moreover, how many prominent Democrats were indicted in the Trump years? 0. Dictators normally control the police agencies of the government. Did Trump control his own FBI, his own DHS, his own DOJ? No. Do dictators willingly cede power? I've never known a dictator to lose an election. Even though Trump thought he won the 2020 election, once his court challenges failed, he vacated office. So if you just apply the kind of normal checklist, the dictatorial checklist, if you will, you realize that Trump doesn't need it at all.
And on the other hand, it was the Biden-Harris Department of Justice that indicted Trump on multiple charges, that went after Peter Navarro, one of Trump's top aide. In fact, threw him in prison, that went after Rudy Giuliani. Some of these people are bankrupt now because of fighting these cases, or they don't have a big retirement nest egg anymore. So it was actually the other party, the other administration that did weaponize the government. Quickly, we'll finish January 6th. I'm going to read some headlines because we know for a fact that there were federal agents in the crowd on January 6th. The New York Times headline says, among those who marched into the Capitol on January 6th, an FBI informant. A Newsweek headline says, secret commandos would shoot to kill authority were at the Capitol. I can keep going down and down. New York Post headline, FBI lost count of how many paid informants were at Capitol on January 6th and later performed audit to figure out exact number. The Federalist headline, FBI refuses to say how many informants were involved in January 6th. The Intercept said Marines charged in Capitol riot got highly sensitive spy jobs after January 6th. Here's an important one from the Washington Post headline, U.S. judge acquits January 6th defendant who said he was waved in by the police. And this is from MSNBC. Joe Scarborough says, you opened the fucking doors for them. That's what Joe Scarborough said live on MSNBC. And Liz Cheney, head of the January 6th committee, she said, quote, the committee hid Trump evidence, end quote. So that's the end of January 6th. Now let's talk about the lawsuits, because many of these lawsuits, from the civil suits to the criminal suits, I think most Americans, like 99.9, even legal scholars, don't understand these lawsuits because they're new and they're novel legal theories. They're very complex. But the idea of somebody having 80 some odd charges against him, criminal charges, and being sued for or ordered to pay, I think it was $100+ million in civil fines. Plus the important one that many people I know on the left and in the middle, the sexual assault civil case. What do you have to say about these cases? How the heck a regular employee at a company would immediately get fired? Like that's just what, if you're a low level intern at a company or the CEO of a publicly traded company or a private company, you would just get fired. That's just how it would work. What do you have to say about all these legal issues with Trump?
You have a bifurcation here, because on the one hand, to many Republicans, it's preposterous that you would see this shotgun blast of so many charges. Had there been one or two charges, let's say that there was a charge on the Capitol on the classified documents, and they said, okay, well, you took these documents, we've been trying to get them back, you're very stubborn and obstinate, so we're forced to make a charge against you. But when you have 91 charges, the sheer sort of proliferation of the charges is ridiculous. Now, of course, on the other side, there are people who go, well, maybe he's a habitual criminal. Maybe this guy is just commits crimes left and right. But so is there a way to adjudicate between these two sides? Yes, there is. This is how to think about it. Here's Trump. This is a guy who's been involved in deal making in the very controversial real estate market in New York and the political environment in New York. And he goes 75 years of his life, not a single criminal charge. And then, as it happens, in the 1 year that he's running to be elected a second time, boom, 91 criminal charges in multiple states, multiple jurisdictions, and there's not a single case which you could say is clear cut. It's always really complicated. Like, yes, he paid off Stormy Daniels, but that's not illegal. And even if he paid her off, for sex, that's not illegal, but nevertheless, it was a campaign finance violation, because had he paid her from his own money, it would have been okay, but because he paid, all this kind of convoluted nonsense. And what that shows you is that if it were in any of these cases, I think anyone other than Trump, they would not be doing it. In fact, we kind of know this, because the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, went to real estate developers after the Trump case and said, hey, listen, don't be scared. Don't think this is going to happen to you, because this is kind of a one-off we wanted to do on Trump. So she was trying to calm the real estate markets, because the real estate people were saying, well, we often overvalue our properties and the banks undervalue them, and we go back and forth. And this is the normal process of buying and borrowing money on real estate. And if nobody gets hurt and nobody loses money, why would you bring charges?
Well, make your case then. By the way, it was really 77 years that he went without a criminal lawsuit or a criminal charge. let's say Trump loses the election. This is just a hypothetical. Let's say he loses. Are these cases going to continue? Are they going to still go after him, or is it, oh, he lost, he's going to be 83 years old next time, so we'll just drop all the charges?
I think that some of the charges will persist, and it's just because the level of vindictiveness toward Trump is so deep. So that there are some people who will say, all right, well, let's move on. Our real objective was always to keep this guy off the ballot. In fact, just coming back to January 6th for a moment, you might have noticed that within like 10 minutes of January 6th, they were calling it an insurrection. And right away, it seemed like a very peculiar, in fact, kind of an arcane word. It's an insurrection. Well, as it turns out, that happens to be the word in the 14th Amendment that allows people to be kicked off the ballot for being, quote, for fomenting an insurrection. So think of how diabolical it is that they were able to plant, if you will, the basis of later cases, the Colorado case, the Maine case that was waiting right behind it, to try to throw Trump off the ballot because he fomented an insurrection. These are people who have thought long and hard about this. They are very unforgiving toward Trump. So no, I don't expect it all to go away. I think that some element of vindictiveness will push at least some of these charges forward.
From a strategic perspective, I'm getting in the Democrats' shoes, the DNC's shoes. When that first indictment came down 2 years ago, I thought it was a horrible strategy. I thought, hey, Trump is the type of guy, because of his brand name, everyone knew who he was before he even got into politics. This is only going to help him. Just like Snoop Dogg's record sales went up after he got in trouble. Eminem's record sales went up. Trump's popularity, even in 2016, continued to go up. The more negative coverage there was, the more support he got. So I don't really understand what the strategy was here to do all this weaponization, because all he did was raise more money and get more support. And anybody with a basic business or marketing or promotional background would tell you, hey, this is only going to help Trump. So I almost feel like the Democrats are helping Trump win this election. Why are they doing, what's the strategy?
Their strategy was developed because this kind of strategy would work against any living human being except Trump. So think of it. Any Republican in the country facing 2 criminal charges would have quit the race, exited the field, basically never be heard from again. Only Trump. See, the Democrats counted on the fact that if we can hang the millstone of convicted felon around his neck, that will crush him. No previous presidential candidate has been able to endure this kind of thing. But see, Trump is an absolute marketing genius. And this goes back to his early career. I was on a show the other day and someone goes, well, Trump inherited his real estate empire from his dad. No, his dad was financially successful in real estate, but nobody ever heard of Fred Trump. Fred Trump was this sort of introspective guy. It was Trump who brought the flamboyance to the Trump name. Trump crossed the bridge from Queens into Manhattan. Trump created the Trump brand. And so similarly, Trump understands, Kamala Harris says, I worked at McDonald's, and Trump knows that's a big deal because he knows if somebody's going to lie about that, something so trivial, who lies about working at McDonald's? People lie about going to Harvard. They lie, I was the CEO of Disney. No, you weren't. But to lie about working at McDonald's is just so petty and so pathetic. So what does Trump do? If he just said she lied, it would be pretty good. That's what a typical Republican would do. What Trump does, he puts on the apron. He's in the drive-thru. He's serving people. They're going nuts as their cars come through. So this is Trump. He understands how to convert these situations into these public dramas, if you will. And again, it is his singular ability to do this, which is why I think I don't understand Republicans who say things like, well, I don't like the guy, but I like his policies. Because Trump is about the only guy who could withstand the kind of attack that the Democrats have brought against him.
Yeah, he really is that powerful, and that just shows how savvy he is. I thought the best strategy for Democrats would have been to do what they did in 2021 and 2022, which was to just ignore it. Like they stopped covering him. It was all about Ron DeSantis, and Ron DeSantis has all this momentum and he's banning books, and Trump was nowhere to be seen. Trump's candidates in the 2022 midterms did not do well at all. Georgia, Arizona, Pennsylvania, a few other places. So I actually thought Ron DeSantis I live in Florida. I thought Ron DeSantis had a legitimate chance at beating Trump. But the moment that first indictment came down, I've got a lot of leftist friends. They were celebrating and they were so happy. They were throwing parties. And I told them, I said, you should actually be upset about this because now you're handing him the election, or at least you're handing him the Republican nomination. And they didn't really get that. I think most leftists don't understand the marketing and behind that. I thought Trump was dead in the water in 2021 and 2022. So it's a miraculous comeback he's had. Do you believe all these polls and betting markets? Like, Trump is now winning by a lot. Now Virginia and New Hampshire and Minnesota are in play.
I think the momentum is going Trump's way, and for two reasons. The left relies on a cocoon of information. They create a dual caricature, a positive caricature of Kamala Harris in which she's actually extremely bright. She is a shining ray of novelty and a new approach, turn the page. And so this is the fake Kamala Harris. And then they create a monster ogre caricature of Trump, in which he's a very scary guy. He's a threat to the republic. So what's happening is both these caricatures are now cracking. Trump is pushing himself out. And people are seeing, gee, this guy's hilarious. He's a bit of a stand-up comedian. And then, of course, the left doubles down and they'll write articles about, yeah, Hitler was a stand-up comedian. You know, Stalin was a stand-up comedian. And you're like, well, I've listened to some Hitler speeches in the original German. It doesn't seem like he was putting out too many, knee slappers out there. I don't see the audience roaring with laughter. So the left is trapped in a mold in which whatever Trump does has to be bad and has to be scary. And that's not really working. On the other hand, the more Kamala Harris shows herself, and she has to show herself to some degree, there is a dramatic contrast between the vacuity, the kind of there's no one upstairs mentality, the giddiness, that laugh of hers is actually an indication of a certain nervous terror where she's like, I don't know what to say, so I'm just going to laugh. Lots of people do that kind of thing, and I think the American people are pretty shrewd about picking up these kinds of personality characteristics. So I think for these reasons, the effort to demonize Trump and lionize Kamala Harris is falling short.
This is the first time we've actually talked about Kamala Harris. That just goes to show she's just an input and a function. Going back to math, like Biden was old. They made use of him. He had no more use. They input the next person. She's an input. I thought there were much, it's not a question of me thinking. We know for a fact, if you go back to the 2019, 2020 primaries, there were much better candidates than Kamala Harris, like Pete Buttigieg. Now he's part of the Biden administration, so it's hard for him, but Josh Shapiro, who's the governor of Pennsylvania. If Kamala Harris loses this election, I'm not even sure that she would win governor of California if she ran, because they have good left-wing candidates there. This is, again, a Trump election, just like 2020 was. Going back to the Trump is Hitler, look, those arguments are just so old and stale. There's something called Godwin's Law, which I'm sure you're aware of. Calling somebody Hitler is a losing strategy. Calling Trump Hitler in India, they had their elections earlier this year. The left-wing media, really most of the mainstream media, called Narendra Modi Hitler and his government neo-Nazis. That's just it doesn't mean anything. It's completely baseless. There's absolutely no comparison between any politician today, at least in a first world country, to Hitler. And one of the things about Trump, you said he's funny. He's hilarious. And I'll tell you, I'm a millennial. And Trump is definitely bringing it. There are people who didn't vote in 2016 or 2020 or who voted Democrat, especially men, who are now voting for Trump this time around because they're like, this guy's just funny. Like, he's a good talker. He's a funny, I would want to hang out with him at a bar. He's hilarious. And there are clips. He was at the Al Smith dinner last week. There are clips of him basically giving stand up. So I wanted to share that. Dinesh D'Souza, the website is dineshD'Souza.com. Any final thoughts you want to share, Dinesh?
Yeah, I want to point out, and I try to bring this out in the film and also in the book, which is that Trump is an egomaniac in public. He loves praise. His crowds aren't just big, they have to be the biggest ever, and so on. But in private, he's not like that. He's self-deprecating. He's very considerate toward other people. And while he does not hesitate to be a bully when he's dealing with other bullies. Trump knows how to deal with bullies. But on the other hand, you'll never see him bullying someone who's beneath him. He'll never bully a doorman or a cab driver or a waiter. Trump is very courteous to those people. And so this private dimension of Trump, which is often not seen in public, I bring out in this film. And I think it will disarm a lot of people who think that somehow Trump is this narcissistical alpha male who throws his weight everywhere he goes. He does have this larger than life dimension, but there's also a kind of gentleness and humor to the man that I think would remove a lot of people's fears about him. If I can mention, Naresh, the movie website is vindicatingtrump.com. That's where you can go to find out where to stream the film or buy DVDs. And the book of the same title is available everywhere.
Vindicatingtrump.com. And by the way, you have known Trump for decades. Like, you're friends. You're not just some media member who makes up stuff. Like, you're an intimate friend of his.
Well, we are friends now, and I do text him and so on, but I do want to emphasize that when he gave me my pardon in 2018, this was for a technical campaign finance violation. I had never met him previously, because a lot of people think, oh, well, Dinesh, he owed you big time and so on. Nonsense. He didn't know me. He didn't owe me. And it's a mark of the fact that he just looked at the case and he goes, this is nonsense and I'm in a position to fix it. So when he did my pardon, I didn't know him. I met him for the first time in 2019 in the Oval Office when he invited us to kind of a meet and greet to get to know him better. But this was a whole year after my pardon.
Is there any chance he would serve in a Trump cabinet position?
The reason I don't think it suits me is partly because I like to stay on the front line of the culture, and the kind of stuff I do, particularly the documentary films, but also the books, the speaking and so on, I think I have a unique kind of niche in the culture. I sometimes say to myself, I don't want to do things that other people can do as well. There are guys like DeSantis, Vivek Ramaswamy. I mean, these are people they are obsessed with the minutiae of government. So I say, give these guys a blowtorch, send them into these agencies. Let's clean up the place. You guys do it. I'm happy to offer free advice from the sidelines, but no, I don't really want to go into the administration. I'd rather do what I'm doing, continue doing what I've been doing all along.
Dinesh D'Souza, thank you so much for checking us out and stopping by the Work From Home Show. To all our listeners, you can go to workfromhomeshow.com, get on our mailing list, follow us on social media. If you have any questions, hello@workfromhomeshow.com. That's hello@workfromhomeshow.com. And until next week, keep on working from home.